all of the landlords that I'd ever met at Bristol, and I pitched them the original concept and got horribly rejected by most. Definitely cried a lot in the first few weeks.
You're listening to Founded and Grounded with Ollie Collard and Dr. Becky Sage. The podcast brings you the honest realities of startup life. If you're a founder or aspiring entrepreneur, this is for you. Hello, I'm Dr. Becky Sage. I'm co-host of Founded and Grounded, and I'm here today with Ollie. We are here with episode 8 of season 6.
We are. After a bit of a long break in recording, we actually spoke to today's guest a number of years ago, but the content is so evergreen that we're delighted to bring it to life today.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many lessons we can learn from this journey. There's so much that we can see. So that being said, who is the person that we're talking to today?
So I spoke to Hannah, who is founder of a prop tech startup called hybr.
When I heard this interview, I felt like Hannah has this story that's a combination of entrepreneurial spirit and a clear need. And this is actually a really funny business concept for me because sometimes, or actually quite frequently, I find myself doing dragon's dens at universities.
Okay. Yeah.
And every single time there is something to do with student housing, the difficulties around student housing, this prop tech piece, how do we as groups find a place, find the right people, find the right property. But nobody yet has actually gone and done it, obviously until now. And whenever they're doing it, I'm able to now point them towards hybr. If anyone comes up with that, I'm like, well, you've got a competitor out there on the market already and they want to take, well, I won't spoil actually how much market share they want to take because that will come up later in the episode. For me, that just spells that it's such a clear problem. You know, every time we do these dragon's dens, we're like, this is clearly a problem. Somebody needs to do something about this.
And most problems people are trying to solve are very personal, aren't they? And I think when you're at university, like that's probably one of your big bugbears, your big pain points that really annoys you. So yeah, it's understandable that that's come up quite a few times. And I guess that's a bit of validation, isn't it? But that actually this is a real problem that the business is solving. It's
very, very real. Like I just see it every single time. And I think that you'll hear in a minute as we go into Hannah's story how she really has validated that problem as well.
Becky, I can't imagine you being a scary dragon though. Are you scary?
No. Depends if you annoy me. we get some people who it's when they do their demographics, their market segments, and it's a digital product, and they say we're aiming at Gen Z because everybody older doesn't know how to use digital products. Then we start to...
Then we have a problem.
Yeah, then we have a problem. Okay, shall we have a listen into Hannah's story and see how she's managed to make this thing a reality when so many people have talked about it but not actually made it happen?
Hannah, good morning. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on Founded and Grounded and also making the trip across from London. I was just saying before we went on air that I had the assumption that you were actually based in Bristol because this is where you started the business, but actually you've actually been based in London sort of post-COVID. So thank you for making the journey across.
Not at all. I love Bristol. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll give you some days reminiscing about starting the business here and attending Bristol University. So before we dive in, Hannah, I want to know, why is the housing market for young people broken and how does hybr solve this problem?
So there's 3 million students that study in the UK every year. Just under 2 million will rent privately. And every year they go through the same ordeal of not knowing where to go to find a house, not knowing who they can trust, renting for the first time, so being kind of drowning in jargon around deposits, tenancy agreements, guarantors, and they have no idea what any of it means. And it's super anxiety inducing and stressful because you've just arrived on campus in September and within a few weeks you have to find your chosen lifelong housemates and friends for life and a place to live. So it's just an incredibly stressful period. And there wasn't a platform that was targeting that first-time renter to build a supportive experience where we can aggregate all available homes in one place for students and match them based on their preference, ideal location, and number of rooms, budget. So really be able to understand the unique preferences of each individual student and match them to relevant houses or house shares and housemates. So really that were the kind of key problems that we wanted to address.
I mean, such an amazing concept. I think going back to 2006 when I started university up in Liverpool, I remember, finishing halls in first year, second year, we rented with 6 boys all in one house. Somebody dropped out within the first couple of weeks. And it was just an absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I think that's what's really quite unique about the student market is it's really about optimizing the search experience for groups. Typically, one student will come with 3-4 friends. So you need to have a search journey that works for groups that you can then match to the right properties. And you have a process of collecting the information needed for tenancy agreements and guarantors for larger groups and be able to handle when someone drops out and you can find a replacement tenant. So it's really about building that experience for the student market, catering for that kind of group experience.
Amazing. Well, take me back to 2019 then, when you had this seed of an idea in your head. How did you go from that concept to actually making it a reality? And I also heard that you actually generated revenue very early on to validate the model. So tell us about, what was going through your head at that point of time?
So in my final year in 2019, I thought I was going to go down the traditional route of consulting. So I was applying for all of the traditional grad schemes, as well as every kind of consultancy job that I could find. And I really hated the whole experience and felt very lost. And at the same time, I was spending my evenings with my housemate Pablo talking about this gap in the market of, where is that supportive platform for students? Seems like such an obvious problem to solve. And so that summer when I graduated, I decided to throw myself in 100% to that business plan. And I was just writing out, the business model and really kind of getting creative, thinking about how I could go about starting the business. And then at the end of the summer, I set up a company on Company's House, a limited company. And I started cold calling. So that was kind of step one. Was I knew I understood the student proposition, but what I didn't know anything about was real estate, the property market. So I went and I cold called all of the landlords that I'd ever met at Bristol and my friends' landlords. And I pitched them the original concept and got horribly rejected by most. Definitely cried a lot in the first few weeks. Very hard to deal with your first rejections, very hard to kind of muster up the courage to pick up the phone. But it taught me so much because every time that they rejected the proposal, I would then go back and I would rewrite the pitch and I'd come up with rebuttals and then I would pitch again. And that process helped me craft the initial proposition for landlords that then allowed me to win our first few landlords to come on board. Quickly created a Squarespace website, which no code needed, and started marketing their properties, matching them to students and generating revenue.
That's incredible. And I think for young entrepreneurs listening, actually picking up the phone, testing the proposition, getting that feedback, getting those rejections, but ultimately improving the proposition and actually going back with something that people want is incredibly valuable. What advice would you have for people who are maybe afraid of doing that or that they're afraid of that rejection? Like, how did you overcome that?
I think it's just about throwing yourself into it. The whole experience of starting a business is just feeling uncomfortable all of the time. And I think if you don't feel uncomfortable, you're doing something wrong. So you have to just get used to feeling really uncomfortable and pushing your limits of what you can really do and saying yes to so many opportunities. I think a lot of people like to build in silo and not tell anyone about their idea. But actually, that's the wrong approach. You need to tell everyone your idea so that you can hear everyone come up with, oh, have you heard about this company and this competitor? Or have you heard about, this way of approaching it? And you actually can learn so much from your peers or from future advisors and future people you might want to work with who might be inspired by your idea and actually want to join that journey. So I'd say just throw yourself out there and just say yes to as many opportunities as possible. And the only way that you're really going to learn whether you're onto something or not is by talking to your user base.
It's a great point there, Hannah, and I think it's a difference between having a sort of a closed mindset and an open sort of growth mindset. And talking of mindset, I'm really interested in your background because I know your mum was an entrepreneur, your dad's quite a successful lawyer. and you've struggled with dyslexia yourself. So how have all these things kind of shaped the person that you are today and helped you along your business journey?
I think it was quite important not feeling, I think it's important going through rejections and failures, quote unquote, early on, because it really helps you become more robust and kind of hardened, I guess. So I always felt this real need to prove myself. Like I wasn't never doing enough. And I think that kind of hunger and drive is felt across a lot of entrepreneurs. So growing up at school, I always wanted to do better and never thought I was kind of good enough. And that drive really meant that when I was at university, I just kind of ended up doing really well in my A levels, but I was told that I was predicted, Bs, and I ended up getting A stars. So I didn't actually get into University of Bristol because I was rejected by my predicted grades. So then I had to prove that I could get the A level results that I ended up getting, and then getting into University of Bristol. And then again, didn't think I was going to get a first, but I proved that I could get a first. And so each part of that journey, kind of proving to myself that if I worked really hard and I focused, I could do something, and I could build that trust within myself. And I think the biggest thing about starting a business is that you have to be able to make decisions, and you have to really trust yourself and trust your instinct. So I think, that part of kind of growing up and that hunger to prove that I could do something and I could be someone was a really important part of the kind of journey I'm on now. And growing up and watching my mum, she went through a kind of difficult startup journey, and her business ended up kind of collapsing. But again, probably without even realizing, an important lesson to see that you can try, you can fail. And I really enjoyed getting involved with kind of product testing and handing out the drinks, because it was a healthy sports drink at the time. And then my brother was the first person that really introduced me to the startup ecosystem when I was at university. So my first year of university, I went and worked in the customer success team of a startup where it was kind of a scale up, Africa's first kind of unicorn. He was the CEO. So I got to experience working the customer success team, being screamed at down the phone, having to turn a negative experience into a positive one, and kind of working out how startup cultures work. And I learned a huge amount by doing that.
Amazing takeaways there, Hannah. And a couple of things that stood out for me is, firstly, that as an entrepreneur, you need to win the battle in your own mind, and often you're your own biggest competitor. And secondly, that actually failure isn't fatal. So what advice would you have for entrepreneurs who are trying to overcome that battle within their own heads?
You can't really start a business without learning how to kind of quickly fail. And it's such a cliche to say, but you constantly have to have a hypothesis, and then you test that hypothesis, you validate whether you are onto something or not, and then you have to quickly drop that idea, have no ego attached to it, and move on and try something else. And it's constantly that kind of A/B testing, learning what's working, what's not working, and then moving on, and that ability to move on. And it's still the hardest things I do now is, you go for a big launch, you have a big idea, and you might spend 3 months on it. But if it doesn't work, you have to drop it, but you not pretend it didn't happen, like learn from it, document it, write it into a playbook, but move on quickly. And so I think it's something you have to get comfortable with within the early days, and challenge yourselves and kind of give yourselves points of accountability to make sure that you are constantly challenging your hypothesis, your business plan, and able to make those decisions to iterate quickly.
It's a really important point about being accountable as well, particularly to yourself and your team. But rewinding back in the early days, I know you did actually start the business with Pablo, who you referenced earlier, but I believe he was only in the business for around 3 months. So how did you go from starting a business with a co-founder to essentially being a sole founder?
So it was a great support system and really needed. I mean, Pablo actually came to me with the initial idea, and we discussed it for hours on end in our kind of final year when we were living together. And he would have loved to be a part of the business, but he was in his final year of medicine and going on that kind of path of being a doctor and working for the NHS. And it's too hard to kind of be able to leave all of that hard work behind. So it was a kind of, a sensible decision for him to focus on being a doctor and me to throw myself into hybr. You can't start a business without putting 100% of your time towards it. And especially when a co-founder dynamic, I think work ethic and time put towards a project are just the most important parts of making sure that you were going to have a good solid foundations for having a co-foundership. So that was a really important decision to make, knowing that, we weren't able to work on it together, but had to work on it alone. But I really needed that support system in the early days to actually be able to take that leap. It was really nice having him there to discuss the idea and kind of brainstorm how we were going to make it into a real business. But at the end of the day, you have to put 100% of your time towards it. And he wasn't able to do that. I think probably in my next business, I'll have a co-founder. I think it's a really important relationship. You have to get it right, but it's very lonely being a sole founder. And I think you can be really strong as a duo if you pick the right person.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I imagine a lot of sole founders, particularly if they're first-time founders, they don't know any difference. They know it's bloody hard and lonely and all those things, but you've got the experience to compare it to of actually having the co-founder in the first period. So I guess it gives you that sort of a wider context to be able to compare to. And that's quite interesting, you saying if you start another business, it probably will be with a co-founder. So have you already started thinking about your next business?
Not at all. Not at all.
Once you got the bug though, right?
Exactly. I know I'll be doing for the rest of my time.
Hannah, can you tell us the different value proposition for both sides of the marketplace?
Of course. So from a student perspective, the kind of biggest pain points are the fact that you can't find a house. You're kind of going from Rightmove to Zoopla to walking up and down the high streets. And 70% of the time, if you make an inquiry on a platform like Rightmove or Zoopla, you never hear back from the agent. And that's because you've been deprioritized against a professional renter. So it's really hard to compare your housing options and find the right house for you. And then you are a first-time renter, so you're lost. You don't know where to go for support. And lastly, you risk exploitation because you can end up renting from the wrong landlord or agent that takes advantage of you. So that's the kind of backdrop from the student side, and hybr addresses and those pain points by building that kind of aggregator and supportive platform, kind of one-stop rental shop. And then from the landlord kind of agent side, the key pain points that we address is that as a landlord or an agent, you are completely overwhelmed by prospective tenants. So when you go to market on, let's say, Rightmove, you're going to get about 40 inquiries per listing. So if you have a portfolio of 100 plus properties, as you can imagine, that's very hard to manage. So that goes into the second key problem, that it's just lettings is super inefficient. It's phones ringing off the hook. It's inboxes full with emails, tenant questions back and forth, most of them unqualified and will waste the team resource. Lots of manual data being inputted over and over again. Difficulty scheduling viewings and getting all the documentation you need for kind of referencing. And though that kind of human error leads to fines with right to rent, etc. So it's a very messy, inefficient process. So to tackle those issues, the key of what we do is that we deliver pre-qualified groups that fit the landlord's requirements to accelerate lease up. So we understand exactly on a per property basis, affordability, tenant profile in terms of age, and make sure they have understood the rent and location, and we only deliver those pre-qualified groups ready to move in. And we've created a dashboard that centralizes the marketing journey so that you're able to track your progress from website clicks to inquiries to viewings and offers, and manage all vetted inquiries, viewings and offers in one place, automating each part of that journey so it can accelerate occupancy rates and streamline that tenant journey to deliver a much better experience. And that team resource that used to go into the manual tasks within lettings can now go towards new business opportunities and providing a really good property management or landlord account management experience. So that's really what we're tackling. It's creating that really efficient marketing CRM that can deliver the occupancy rates you need with the right tenants in a really short period of time.
It's a very clever solution, I have to say. And talk to me about the competitive landscapes. Obviously, starting in 2019, we're in 2024 now. So how has that changed and how do you stand out from your competition?
So really that product I just described we're launching that latest version this September. So it's been a continuous kind of journey of speaking with our landlords and agents to work out what is that unique product that we can bring to market. And across the industry, you have a lot of really great property management systems, but all that journey starts, and in terms of that kind of tech product, starts at the moment of move-in. So post-tenancy agreement being signed, or at the point when the tenancy agreement is signed, to the move out. So it really accounts for the invoicing, rent payments, management in terms of when people want to flag any maintenance issues. But the big gap in the market is that there was no kind of tech product that was looking at solving for the kind of pre-tenancy experience, everything from listing, marketing, viewings and offers. And that's really the space that we're going after, focusing on our niche, which is students, and optimizing for group bookings. So it's been continuously working on not jumping to create a product, but by working closely with landlords and agents, just by delivering them the kind of pre-qualified groups, working out how we could bring something to market that they could rely on every day and become part of their integrated lives.
Amazing. And talk to me a bit about your fundraising journey. You recently raised your seed round of 3.24 million. Congratulations, first of all. And I wanted to know a bit about your entire funding journey, and specifically, what advice would you highlight to founders who are maybe raising for the first time?
Raising for the first time is incredibly daunting, especially if you're our first-time founder, because you have no network. And that's the biggest issue. So you have to go out and create a network whilst you're creating your own brand, so introducing your business concept to the market and trying to, fundraise within potentially a 6-month window. So it's an incredibly stressful experience. What I'd say is what's really helped me in our first fundraise is using LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an incredible tool that helps you build a network when you don't have one and gives you access to really interesting people. So really personalizing that outreach to make sure you're targeting the right people. So for me, that was marketplace investors and founders and advisors, VCs, people who focus on female founders, and prop tech. So understanding what your kind of 3 buckets are, making sure that your outreach is really personalized and targeted. And then once you get into the angel network world, which is probably how you'll raise your first round, if you pitch well and you make sure that, again, when your first pitch, you're always improving and you're taking on that feedback, then an angel will always introduce you to another angel. So that was how I kind of tapped into that market for the first time, is just by really developing relationships and then being introduced to their network, as well as pitching competitions, which has been a big part of my journey. So anytime you can get a chance to grab a mic and get on stage, it just means that you're going to open up your network, because afterwards people come over to you and they'll introduce you to other people. So again, it's about being really open to going to the right networking events and pitching competitions and putting yourself out there, telling your story, so that you can get in front of the right people that can help introduce you to your future funders.
And have you got follow-on investors from your pre-seed round to your seed round?
Yes.
Amazing. And tell me a bit more about your seed round that you just raised.
So the seed round we raised took about 6 months, which they usually do, and the raise was really all about doubling down on the supply product. So with supply demand marketplace, the demand is the students, the supply is the landlord agents. So again, really already had that clear product differentiation for the student side, but the raise was then about doubling down and building something sticky and valuable for long-term retention, to unlock that scalable growth to get us to our Series A. So it was all about mapping to say, okay, where are we going to be in Series A? Where do we need to work back for the seed round? What do we need to do to get there? And then building the right team and really launching that kind of nailing that product differentiation before we get to the next kind of milestone.
I think that's really important, because sometimes founders just concentrate on their current round that they're raising and don't look ahead, and often give away too much equity early on, which makes the later rounds ininvestable. So it's obviously very clear that you thought that journey through.
Yeah, and I would also say, we're operating in the UK in a very hard fundraising environment. 2% of funding goes towards women, and it's never been harder really to raise capital, especially from VC. So it's really important to take the time, and if you can avoid raising money, then definitely avoid raising money. If I could go back and start again, I would have spent longer, profitable, bootstrapped, to then really kind of have a really clear path to scaling and then getting to profitability again, because can't take risks. You never know what the market or what happened within the market. And in the UK, sadly, where everyone is very anti-risk, and they're looking for very high kind of momentum growth month on month, or looking for profitability.
And tell me about some of the challenges that you faced as a female founder.
I think being a female founder, it's always hard to answer that question because obviously I don't know anything different.
Sure.
But they've done a lot of studies that say that when they've compared women pitching to male pitching in terms of raising money, the questions and the response rates are wildly different. So I think it's about, one of the issues is kind of being underestimated. But I think there's a lot of power that becomes in being underestimated, because if people expect nothing from you, there's only one way up. So I think I've always quite enjoyed being underestimated. I think that's a good position to be in. And there's also the issue of everyone wants to be your advisor and tells you that, without them, you won't succeed. So I think you have to be even more strict with your time and the decisions you make of who you trust and who you let into that inner circle, and being really careful of whose money you take. And I didn't take that seriously enough. So really understanding that even when you're desperate for cash and you feel like the business will collapse without it, it's better to hold off, because every person that gives you and invests in your business, you should think of them as like a co-founder.
A word about our sponsors.
So Becky, we had a founder on the show recently who told us his son said to him, "Dad, you're married to your work." Being a parent, no one wants to hear that. I mean, it literally cuts through everything, and it stuck with me ever since he said that. Because, having two young kids, you've got to ask yourself the bigger questions in life. Are the things that actually matter sorted?
Like the boring admin that no one wants to do.
Exactly, like life insurance has been on my list for years, sat between updating a will, setting up a power of attorney, which is why today's sponsor really caught my attention. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, all online. Quote in seconds, apply in as little as 10 minutes. No medical exam, just a few health questions online, up to 3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 4,000 reviews. Take 10 minutes to get covered today with life insurance through Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/founded. That is ethos.com/founded. Application times may vary, rates may vary.
I really like what Hannah just said about entrepreneurs do not need to take all the money and advice that is offered. In fact, they probably shouldn't. They definitely shouldn't take all the money and advice that's been offered. And I think that's especially true if you're being underestimated. So I wanted to talk a bit more about this idea of the power of being underestimated, because I feel like it's a balance. It's a delicate line. And I think it's something I've definitely experienced, being underestimated. It's not always a positive. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Did you get a sense of why Hannah was able to kind of turn it into a positive thing for her?
Yeah, I think the fact that she is young and full of energy and enthusiasm and actually solving a real problem, then I think that means that she's able to articulate it in a way that is very clear. So I think she's very clear, very passionate, and that definitely plays to her advantage. I think being underestimated, like you can look at it through both lenses, can't you? You can either take the view that I've got to overcome all these barriers and, nobody's going to give me the time of day, or actually you go, well, I've got all of these things against me. And actually everyone really does love an underdog story, but it's having the confidence and the backing to keep going again and again when you get knocked down.
Perhaps being younger is actually easier with that, actually, because you haven't had as many experiences where you have been knocked down. Or although I guess with Hannah's story, she did talk about how she's overcome several things, and perhaps that's what's helped her be strong as well.
Yeah, I think the more you kind of hear rejection, it does build up that muscle, doesn't it? But it's something that you have to learn over time and through experience.
I think one of the things for me personally, that one of the challenges with being underestimated is you might not make it into the room at all. You might not be listened to at all if you are in the room. And so I think that that's something that she's clearly been able to overcome in some aspects of her journey.
Yeah, and also I think once you're in the room, it's about being unapologetic about it and actually believing that you deserve the right to be in that chair and in that room and in that conversation. And if you don't believe it yourself, then yeah, it's hard to overcome that barrier.
Yeah, and you still need all the things that are needed anyway, right? You need that belief, you need the knowledge, you need that market research, you need good business proposition. You need all of the things when you go into that room. One of the things I think that can be really positive about being underestimated, being an underdog, is that you inherently don't fit the mold. And actually that's a good thing, because not fitting the mold does mean that you stand out in some ways as well. So whilst it means that you can completely be under the radar and perhaps not even invited in the rooms, not listened to at all, it also can mean that once you are, and once you show up with the stuff, that you then stand out over and above everybody else.
Yeah, I think when you got to that kind of tipping point of being listened to and being seen and heard and valued, then people are like, well, actually, they've done that and they've had all these things to deal with on top of that. So I think, again, it plays to your advantage once you get to that tipping point. But getting to that tipping point isn't easy.
Yeah, I've experienced both sides of that equation as well. And I know that feeling of like being in that position and being that person who probably does stand out because it wasn't what was expected. And then also, I've felt like I have had those times when you just feel like you're never even getting into the room or you're never being listened to. It's, you know, that feeling when you can just tell that people are just closed off. And that feeling, I mean, I know everyone experiences that, but I think that can be one of the things that happens when people have low expectations of you.
Yeah, and I think if you're on that day and you're not in the right frame of mind and you hear that, then it can completely derail everything you're going to say and do. But you've got to really stay strong in that belief that you've got value to bring.
And I love that you said, like, on that day, because that's the thing, right? And it's all transient, and it is, that mindset piece is so important. But it's also okay to have some of those days where you're like, I'm not being listened to, I'm struggling, I haven't got the energy, I don't have, I don't feel like I'm in that position to have that confidence for myself right now either. And that does happen, but the entrepreneurial way is to be resilient.
Yeah, and I think you're always your own worst critic as well. So even if you're not feeling very confident or you feel like you're not articulating yourself very well, then often you're very harsh on yourself. But actually, if you ask the people in the room, actually, you probably still came across as those things, but yeah, you're just being very self-critical.
You know, one phenomenon that's come into really tight focus for me recently is also that maybe you are underestimated by some people. Sometimes they're not the right people. So like you can have doors closed on you, or people who glaze over when you're talking or don't listen to you. The thing that I've noticed throughout my career is those are the people that are like the non-playable characters in your life. They're the backdown. Like, they're not the ones. They're not the ones you respect. And therefore, like, do you even want their, like, whatever it is?
Why do you want their respect?
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the lessons I've had to learn for myself is to sort of go, actually, not going to listen to those people, not going to put my focus there. It's easier said than done, but going to shift my focus. And often those easier relationships and those ones where you bounce off people and you like amplify each other, those are the people that you actually respect as well. And so that's also, I think, a really important reflection to have, and can help with the mindset sometimes too. Like, you don't need all of these people. You need the right people on your journey.
100%. You don't need all the people, and it is those right people, and identifying those right people, and the people that say no or glaze over or don't give you the time of day, then great, move on from them. Don't even worry about them. But it's way easier said than done. and you probably have to go through that journey yourself.
Which kind of brings us on to one of the other clear points that was in this part, which was the piece about overcoming rejection. And one of the things I was thinking about there was something we've talked about quite a lot, I think, which is the idea of the like going for the no's actually, and going, the more of those naysayers you find, like the more of the diamonds that you also find out there. And that's part of that tenacity and that discipline to get out there and just do the work.
And sometimes it can be hard to hear, right? And you take it very personally, but if you can be a bit more objective about it and look at the bigger picture and not get so caught up in that moment, then you're able to take that helicopter view and then look over a longer term period and go, well, actually that doesn't matter right now. I can focus on the big picture.
I've had the fun deep dive into something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is something that a lot of neurodivergent people have. And it's essentially by bypassing your logic brain and going straight to a very like physical, emotional response to anything that is perceived as rejection. And I experienced this, and it's horrible. And it can make this idea of rejection, or certainly a perceived rejection. It's not even necessarily like a real tangible one. Those are maybe even easier to deal with. But when you've got that kind of perhaps passive aggression, or people closing doors and not talking to you, or that kind of thing, I get this like big emotional response, which can, I say emotional response, no, it is actually more physical than anything else. I made a YouTube video on it if anyone wants more of a deep dive. But that's something where I kind of had to dive into it deep, because I was like, what's going on? Because actually that kind of thing does derail you from being able to just get up the next day and move forward. Yeah,
but if your whole body's going into that, shutting down your nervous system, and you're not able to operate, then that's got a massive consequence. So what you're saying is it's the perceived risk of rejection rather than the actual physical rejection. The actual rejection is okay.
Well, certainly for me, and I've always dealt pretty easily actually with like certain difficult circumstances, or if you've always got like something to work towards, then I'm fine. It's more of that like you don't really know what to do and it all feels a bit overwhelming, but you've also got that perception that people are shutting doors on you, which they may well be, but it becomes like a bigger thing. And I think it's actually, for me, that seems to have got stronger over time. And I think it's probably a build-up also of like having gone through some of those situations where you realize, actually, my instinct was right about that person. So then it's just about how you respond to it. And it's more about, okay, if the instinct is right, then great, move on quickly, move on to the next person. And then the instinct is also right on the positive people as well, or the people who are there to amplify what you're doing to help you along the way. Focus on that, and focus on the work actually too, because that's the other thing. It's when it's just very, again, that word amorphous, it feels like it comes up, I don't know, but that's just how I kind of experience it, of just not being able to see sort of the wood for the trees, and therefore not being able to grasp like a thread of something. It's all just foggy, versus if you can just sit down and be like, do you know what, I'm just going to get on with some tasks. And then you soon remember, oh, this is me. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm okay. But it's not a fun thing to go through.
It's not easy, is it?
No.
But the first thing to identify is that actually you acknowledge what was happening, and actually, realize what the triggers were, and actually how you could identify how to overcome those barriers. Because I think it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, can't it? Like, I can't remember who said that quote, but it's like, if you think you can or you think you can't, then you're right. And it's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is true. And I personally was having a bit of a moment where I realized I haven't done a gratitude journal for a long time. Sorry, this may seem really left field, but I think it's relevant to this, which is what do we need to do that mental hygiene, which pays off over time, but also depletes over time. So if you haven't done something where you're like shifting your mind towards the more positive things, and you're starting to kind of come up against some of those barriers and letting yourself like swim in that pool for a little while, then you're struggling a little bit more, and these things kind of come up when you go through when you're doing that. So I think it's about recognizing what's your mental hygiene that you need to do.
Yeah, so true, because then you can't hold that extra tension, that extra capacity, and then a couple of bad decisions go against you, and then you're like back into that mode of being unregulated and not being able to operate your best. So I think, fundamentally you've got to dedicate towards time to making what feels good, know what's good for you mentally. And sometimes when you're busy and overwhelmed, then it's hard to dedicate time towards those things, isn't it?
That's the thing, I think, isn't it? And also if you're kind of like, oh, everything's fine, I'm just ticking along, and then you're just you're busy, you're doing other things, you're just getting on with the work, whatever it might be, running around from one thing to the other, and not just stepping back and being like, actually, you could really benefit from writing a gratitude journal or doing a nature walk without a podcast in or whatever. I think it's that I've had a bit of a wake-up call recently around that for sure. And I think if other founders are feeling that way, it's definitely a case of step back, figure out like what's your mental hygiene that you need. And to that point we were making just now about really focusing on the positives and focusing on like what can you do, who can you reach out to, like who are the people who you can engage with, who can you help, like the people you're already serving, can you and who value what you're doing, like focus on that, and that's where the good stuff will then start to amplify. Again, easier said than done, but yeah, that's the theory.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's not trying to do it all by yourself, is it? It's identifying those people that can help you and building in time to understand how they can help you in an easy way, which takes you towards the goal that you want to achieve.
Yeah. I've had a couple of people who were, friends in the network, and I often think, in fact, it's how we ended up here, but there's these people that you want to talk to more, you want to have a coffee with, and time runs out, and you kind of you shift perhaps into some of these pools of negativity because that's just like what life looks like right now, and that's like you have to spend more time with certain people because that's the job you're doing or whatever. That's clients that you're working with or collaborators, and then you've got these other people that you want to spend time with, and it's just as simple as like doing a voice note for people or sending a message or things like that, where you're like, no, look, there's all of these people on your contacts list who are great people and who get you and get what you're trying to do, and so don't forget them.
No, and also like if you're mentally thinking about that, the time you waste kind of overthinking it, then you could actually have left that 30-second voice note or that quick email or that quick LinkedIn message, whatever it is, then don't overthink it too much. Do take action and get to that next step.
If people think you're a weirdo for doing that, maybe they're not the right ones, and the right ones will love it because they'll be like, oh, you were thinking of me.
Yeah.
Great. So we've already heard from Hannah about some of the ways that she deals with challenges in the business. But now it's time to hear a bit more about what those actual challenges are. So let's head over to part 2 of the interview.
So Hannah, entrepreneurship comes with many highs and also many lows. Can you tell me what has been one of your favourite failures with hybr and how you overcame it?
I can think of one of the most recent ones where we put a lot of time and resource in planning a big event. We had an event that went really well, building up our student community. So we tried to kind of test the idea in a slightly different way. And we were really excited. Everyone on the team was there. We invited the press along, and one person turned up. 100 people said they were going to turn up, but one person actually turned up. A small failure, but it's always a bit of a punch in the gut. And you have to just celebrate the learning. And that's something we really try and do in our kind of culture, is not shy away from the kind of post-mortem or the retro that you do on, okay, let's sit down on what happened, how did it happen, what was the impact, how did we learn it was a failure, and how do we make sure that never happens again? And that's a really important process to go through every time, whether it's as small as, an event you put on that you expect will be a great kind of brand building and community building exercise, or whether it's more serious, like a tech feature, a kind of tech launch that is full of bugs and breaks down your system and everything. Everyone panics. You need to have that same level-headed approach of, okay, that happened. I'm glad it's happened this early on. Now let's take that retro process seriously and work out how we'll make sure it never happens again.
And using that example, what was the main point of failure, do you feel, and how will you approach that differently next time?
So that's all about communication. I think it's not underestimating that you can't send out, a couple emails. You need to make sure that you're really getting into the kind of community's face, and that you're getting engagement throughout and you're tracking engagement. So people can tell you yes once, but 3 weeks later, things will change. So making sure you're continuously in touch with your users, and that you're making sure you're testing your hypothesis, that they really understand what is the event, what it's for, why they should come, where it is, what time it is. Like really going back to the basics and making sure that the communication is really clear pre-event, and making sure that you're only putting your kind of time and resource towards your core business. I think that's the biggest learning across the whole journey for every founder. Is it's so easy to get distracted and work on shiny projects, and you have to keep on going back to what is your North Star metric, what is your two company objectives for the quarter, and if that project is not going to directly impact the two company objectives that then correlate to the North Star, then do not work on it. And being really strict with your time, because again, as a founder, you're always wanting to test so many different things. You're always wanting to see whether, not putting all your eggs in one basket and seeing whether something is gonna explode. But it just means that you don't have enough time to really focus on what's important, and you're more likely to burn out.
Some great advice there. I think that prioritization and focusing on the right thing is so important in the world of startups. And I've been guilty of this of myself, of, chasing the latest shiny object and getting distracted. But I think you learn as you go with that journey, don't you? And realize that, you have to stay literally zoned in on your North Star. Otherwise, you're just going to go away from the business. So talk to me a bit about your demographics and your target audiences. And I'm really interested to know a bit about, the differences between Gen Z and millennials.
There's a lot of kind of conflicting philosophies around the different stereotypes around generations. Some people say that Gen Z are less risk averse. So millennials are the entrepreneurs, they're risk takers, and Gen Z are more risk averse. But they're very passionate around social causes, and they really crave kind of social interaction, but they're kind of more introverted. That's kind of the stereotypes of kind of Gen Z versus millennials. I think what's really interesting about the younger generations is that they're the call out generation. So if they see something is not wrong, they will call you out. And that's kind of where cancel culture's come from for all of its flaws. But the good thing is that they're not afraid to use their voice in the way that I think millennials were more scared of using their voice, and definitely for boomers and above. So that's a great thing about Gen Z and the younger generations, is that they're confident to use their voices and say when things are not right, and they're very passionate.
Hannah, I'm interested to know what's your view on home ownership in the UK? And I know you've got a mission to eventually help hybrids enter the property ladder. So really interested in your insights on the matter.
Yeah, our kind of mission and vision is to revolutionise the kind of student housing experience so that it's super seamless and efficient, and students are able to find their dream rental and get all the support they need. And it's not this kind of horrific experience that you dread. So really kind of flipping that whole concept of renting on its head, focusing on that, on our target market. But we are not trying to, be like Germany, where you have a culture of renting, up until you're in your 60s. We really want to help students understand their financial health, help them understand how they can build up a good credit score, what that means. So paying their rent on time, being a good tenant, making sure they're making those decisions and they can start saving as early as possible to help them get on the property ladder. So that's really important for us. And what we're introducing is that ability within the kind of hybr passport, a feature that's coming later, to really help students track that and kind of incentivize good behavior, that they can then build and use that to take out a much better mortgage, because it's a risk model based on actually how you are as a renter rather than just on an arbitrary salary. So we really want to help educate students, and that's a big piece around student renting in kind of in its complete form. As students are first-time renters, they need a lot of support and guidance. So every step of that journey, it's about hand-holding them and help breaking it down into layman terms and helping them understand what it is and what they can do and what are their options.
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that. I think we've done a lot of kind of funding with early stage founders, and we have to look at lots of credit reports. And I think people just generally like the awareness around what can impact it. Like, you know, if you don't address those issues, it can have long-term significant impacts, and obviously your ability to access credit. So I think hats off to you guys for, you know, playing an important part in that educational piece there. Hannah, I'm interested to know, who keeps you firing on all cylinders?
I think one very important dynamic, or one very important personality trait that's needed in a founder is to be an optimist and just be able to take, you know, wave after wave and like hit after hit, punch after punch, and just be able to get back up and focus on the North Star. So you just have to be a complete optimist. And luckily, I was born with that, so I didn't have to learn how to be one. But I find it really supportive and helpful having a brother and a sister-in-law, so my brother's wife, who are both founders, and they are, you know, a year or 2 years ahead in their journey, which is really helpful because it means that I can see them going through the obstacles I go through and overcome them. And when it looks like everything is going complete tits up and, you know, it's doom and gloom, they find a way around, and it's just really inspiring to watch, and it helps me build up my own conviction every time.
So Hannah, building a business can be all-consuming. I want to know about a sacrifice that you've made either consciously or subconsciously.
I think you can't juggle everything. You have work, you have friends, you have family, and you have your own time. And I very much sacrifice my own time because friends and family are really important to me, and it's how I stay sane. So I work really hard in the week and I don't do much in the week so that I can have that time on the weekend to kind of detach and spend with friends and family. And that's the balance I really need. But something has to give. So I think it's always been a battle for me to really try and focus on longevity. So knowing that actually prioritizing wellness and going to the gym and focusing on your health is actually investing in your business. I think that's been a huge learning for me over the last 12 months in particular, and something I'm still learning and trying to find my rhythm, because you're moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour and you can't fit everything into 7 days. So it's about learning your balance and what you need. I like a useful way of thinking. There's, you know, looking at your day and thinking and working out the projects that energize you and drain you, and optimizing your day so you're starting and ending with the projects that are going to energize you. I think you have to be really self-reflective and in touch with how you're feeling to make sure you're always making rational decisions, especially when you're managing a large team, and showing up in the right way with your team. So managing how you're feeling, checking in with yourself, whilst also, you know, going 1,000,000 miles per hour and running the business.
And it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you haven't really gone into the world of work. Obviously, you started the business straight from university. So I guess you haven't picked up any bad habits or anything that would make you not run the business in a sustainable way.
I think it's very hard to run a business in a sustainable way as a founder, just because of the sheer amount of time you have to commit. So, you know, you just know that you're not going to really check out. So even if it's weekends or holidays, you're always going to have to be on. But as long as you love what you're doing and you know when you reach your limit that you can actually give yourself some time off and just being in check with yourself, that's very important. I wouldn't say it's the healthiest and most sustainable. There's very much better kind of paths you can take if you're looking for a good work-life balance.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. And talk to me a bit about your team. You mentioned it there. How big are you now in terms of a team? How do you act as a leader? What's one of your key traits as a startup founder and motivating and inspiring a team to achieve greatness?
There's a book called Radical Candor, and I really love that approach, which is about being radical, so being direct, but in an empathetic way because you genuinely care and want the best for them. And I think it's a really nice framework. It's much more female than a lot of the startup narratives out there that I find do not work for me. So being empathetic but direct because you want the best outcome for them as an individual, and that fits into the team. And we are a team of 15. And yeah, it's constantly learning. It's the largest learning trajectory, highest learning kind of curve you could possibly go on. And constantly learning every day how to build a better team culture, be able to track the best talent. And you can't do that as a first-time founder with no funding. So it's a continuous journey because you're having to start a business, but you're unable to attract the best talent. So you have to find people who really buy in and then can kind of learn with you.
What's the split between sort of remote working and in the office, out of interest?
It's about 70% in the office, but it's definitely been a battle. People only come in 2 days a week. Some come in 3 days a week. I'm in every day. But everyone moved out of London during COVID, and a lot of the team we hired kind of during COVID or just after, and flexibility is so important for people. So it's a constant battle trying to find an office that's nice enough to attract the team, but not too expensive because people are only going to be there 2 days.
Yeah, it's a big pain point. And talk to me a bit about the hustle culture. We kind of referenced it earlier, and you were talking about Gen Z sort of calling people out on things and stuff like that as well. So I'm interested to know, what are some of the bad narratives that you've kind of heard in terms of the startup land, or what are some things that you thought, I definitely want to avoid doing that myself?
I really don't want to be an echo chamber around working every day. I found that really toxic and really difficult because you're constantly punishing yourself that you're not working hard enough. I love the Guy Raz podcast, How I Built This. But so much of that narrative is, in the early days of my business, the first few years, I slept under the desk. My girlfriend broke up with me. I was eating pot noodle every day. And as a young founder, and you kind of look up to these people, and you start your business and you try and follow suit, and it's not sustainable, and it's also not true. It's so exaggerated, and that you go through stints where you're going to have to be working every weekend, but it's not a long-term sustainable option if you want to be building a long-term successful business and a good culture. So it's one of the narratives that I really don't want to perpetuate. I don't want to kind of continue it. So yeah, I think that's one of the most toxic narratives in the ecosystem.
Hannah, I'm interested to know, you talked about advisors earlier. What's the worst bit of advice that you've ever received?
When I was pitching, a VC told me that I should discontinue the core model of matching tenants and landlords, optimizing for a happy tenancy, and focus on food for international students, and then they would invest.
Well, it must have been an easy decision. Your North Star, right? So you've just gone, no.
Yeah, would have had to be a pretty dramatic pivot, and I have absolutely no experience in the food world.
Funnily enough, that VC suggestion that Hannah was just telling us about, the one to do with food for international students, is another one I see a lot at Dragon's Dens. We kind of laugh, me and some of the other regular dragons, we always know that we're going to get something about food and something about housing. And the market's going to be students always. Like, I know how many students there are in the UK. I hear it a lot. That 3 million number was not new to me in this pitch. Yeah, it was, but it was still a crazy suggestion, because she was like, what do you mean? Why would you just suggest a totally different business? Yeah. Like, it makes,
is it? It's a whole new business.
Yeah, like, made no sense whatsoever. But I guess to our point that we were making after the analysis of section 1, that person could be easily filtered out. And it sounded like she literally was like, yeah, not listening to that, move on. I've got other people I can go and talk to now. So one of the things I thought came across really clearly in this section was the idea of getting back to basics and kind of stripping out all the complication and just prioritizing. And in fact, Hannah described it in a really detailed way. I was like, oh, writing notes, taking tips. Okay, you need your 2 goals that meet that go towards your North Star metric. And so I thought that this was a really kind of clear way that she's working on the business. Did it come across when you were talking to her that she had this real sense of being able to simplify things and prioritize things?
Yeah, and I think that is somebody who knows the market and the business inside out. If you're able to simplify it in easy terms and explain it to anybody, then I think that's where the holy grail is. But I love the point about doing the basics brilliantly. And a lot of people apply that methodology to, say, being in the army or coaching a particular team sport, is actually not doing the technically really difficult things well. Is actually mastering the basics. So they become so fundamental that you don't even have to think about it. It's like second nature. And if you're operating at a very high level, doing the basic things right, then you can invest your mental, physical energy in doing the top tier things that are a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's definitely one of the reasons why I didn't stick to ballet when I was like 5 or 6 years old, because ballet certainly does that. But gymnastics lets me play a little bit more. Having said that, of course, like, I know that in gymnastics, like, if you've got some of those basic skills, like, really at tip top level, then everything else just flows from that. It's much easier and you've got that solid foundation. It was interesting when I first started hearing Hannah's interview, I was like, how did she do this so early? Like, where did that come from? Where did that impetus come from? Like I said, I've heard so many students be like, if we were to do a business, this is what it would be, but they don't do it. And so, I mean, there are students who do businesses, obviously, but I wonder if some of this also comes from family members. It seems like she had those role models both when she was growing up and as she was going through those student years as well. So she had opportunities to work in business and perhaps see some best practice there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of like student enterprise pitch events as well. And it's, you get that sense that it's a kind of an idea, an aspiration, but actually Hannah is a very accomplished business operator. And you can tell by the language that she uses in terms of, you know, she's done a pre-seed, seed round, looking at Series A at some point. You know, she can walk the talk and talk it with confidence. And I think that really comes across. And I think, yeah, where has that stemmed from? And as you say, obviously her mother's entrepreneurial experience and then her half brother and half sister doing businesses out in Africa. Like, obviously she's got some role models in her life and she's seen that side of entrepreneurship. And it is a bit of like, sometimes if you can't see it, you can't be it, but she has seen it and she is being it.
Yeah, and I obviously definitely didn't mean to imply that Hannah's business is a student business, right? It's not the same thing as like doing an assignment or doing a project or something like that. And also we're way further down the line from when she started it now as well. But yeah, that came across really clearly to me. And it's that thing of, yeah, if you can't see it, you're fumbling around in the dark, basically. So you might have good educated guesses and you might have a sense, but you don't actually know how that feels. And I think a lot of what she was explaining about those experiences she had were like very experiential. She'd actually been there, done that.
It was that lived experience, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Not the theoretical playbook of some MBA or something like that.
Exactly. And then I think that came across so clearly with how she was speaking about how she's kind of designed the way her business works and how she's building it. And like I said, how she was doing the prioritization. She talked about radical candor as well. So I think that understanding like how that actually works, and it felt like there was a real inherent understanding. This radical candor, she spoke about the book, but also Netflix has it as one of their pillars within the No Rules book, and it's this idea of having directness, but it's not about being rude or aggressive or like any of those things. It's just good, clear communication, and not holding back and not waiting on things as well, being open. And to me, that's a form of prioritization as well. It's like prioritization of messaging and making sure that you don't spend your time with people kind of being too fluffy and around the edges. Like, well, you can still be friendly, but yeah,
that's what I was really impressed by, actually, because she understands that you can be pulled in a million different directions, and actually you can only achieve a couple of things on one hand. And actually, if you want to go about that, then you need to be more direct and you need to be clear on it and go into those conversations with intent, not operating on the edges, as you say, and being a bit woolly, because otherwise, the results that you see are going to be a bit woolly as well.
Yeah, and it's hard for other people when they're trying to listen to you then too, and it's that you start to get kind of muddying the waters in terms of expectations and that kind of thing. So yeah, keeping that really clear, really direct communication, still with, like I said, like compassion, and I think this is what she was talking about as well. And I thought, that's just, to me, it just felt like all of this was like an inherent understanding of what it is to like be fixed on the goal and to understand where you need to get to and to try and make that as frictionless as possible. Which also then led into the next thing that she was talking about, which was kind of running a business in a sustainable way, and how that is actually hard to do, right? That's the goal, and especially as a founder in terms of running it sustainably from your energy perspective. I think that's so important and incredibly difficult to do.
It's really hard, especially when she's managing a team of people and you've got limited time, limited opportunities. Where are you going to invest that time, money and energy? And if people are seeing that you're burnt out and chasing after too many things as the leader of that business, then, guess what? That's going to rub off on your employees, right? So I think, she's great in terms of that. Very mature for her age, like definitely really good at kind of leading a team. And I think that really comes across from listening to her. And I think, blown away by how she's achieved that at such a young age, really.
Yeah, I often think that. And then I think, I've actually met so many founders now who've been so successful in their 20s, which to me, I'm just like, was struggling trying to survive in my 20s,
My 20s, I think, to be fair.
Better than me. I was too stressed. I should have chilled out more, but I guess that wasn't my personality. Wouldn't have been authentic.
Well, you got to live your life, haven't you? At the end of the day.
My high intensity stressed out life. No. Also some chill. I've actually, even this week, I've had multiple one-to-ones with founders who are feeling burnt out at the moment, and they kind of do all the right things, and that's often what makes it hard. But they hit a point where they've kind of gone, oh, let's just keep doing this for a little while longer, or we just get to this point, or something unexpected has happened, and they've had to pick up the slack somewhere where they weren't planning to do it, and therefore they're then like, oh, I'm really feeling like I'm getting to the end of my tether. And one of the factors there, I think, is it's kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about. It's the controlling kind of tendencies of founders, that piece where it's really hard to delegate and really hard to have somebody else on the team take things on from you. And it does require you to get that balance right in terms of that direct communication, quality of expectations, and figuring out how to create a dynamic where you can trust them and they can trust you, and you can check in with them, and there's that kind of quality control there. But actually handing over some of those reins is a really important part of this.
Yeah, I mean, delegation is called an art for a reason, right? Because it's not easy to do, particularly if you have that emphasis on detail and you want to have that ultimate say in things. But if you want to scale a business, then you've got to be able to let go. Yeah. Otherwise, you're not going to grow it, and you're going to frustrate the people that you're trying to work with.
Yeah. Like one of the people this week, we literally had to sit down and be like, well, let's look at the scenarios, because there's the worry about delegating and figuring out how to find the right people and kind of going through all of that. But at the end of the day, that's a process, and yes, it's a risk, but at the same time, if you don't take that risk, what happens? And so we had to like literally go through those scenarios. And it was so obvious with this founder that it wasn't an option to do it any other way. I mean, there's always a million ways to do certain things, but it just felt like either she was going to completely burn out, or it was a case of like, well, maybe we just, I mean, they were never going to do this, but I was like, or the business stops then, like what's the scenarios here? And it was like, okay, I've got to figure out how to find the right people, go through the processes. And then of course, like that's the sort of thing that I can be there to help people with as well. So that's nice to be able to be in that position.
They've got to be open to be able to have those conversations with you as a trusted advisor as well. Because if you're trying to do all of that in your head, then you're going to become a mess of spaghetti, basically.
Yeah. And that's why I think that there's probably a slight misnomer that this entrepreneurial journey is a set of theoretical skills. I mean, almost going back to that student assignment piece, right? Like, what do you put in a business plan? How do you do market research? Like, how do you design the right team and the right and do a P&L and cash flow? But that's not what entrepreneurship actually is day to day. Entrepreneurship is all about like how you navigate things. And so, and honestly, like Claude can tell you most of those theoretical things, right? It can do most of that for you. The part it can't do is make you as the founder that person who's putting themselves out there, managing the team, going through all these rejections over and over again. And so that's something that I personally think, and certainly in my experience, that's where I end up having to give the most support to people, is just like keeping them steady, building that confidence and keeping them going and getting them to make those right decisions and helping them to see what's the right decision for them. So it's, sorry, I'm not here blowing my own trumpet. I guess the point here is the support system, right? It's who have you got around you, and making sure that they're not. In fact, again, I've kind of had people who've worked with me who are like, these aren't the type of things I can talk about with my advisory board. And you're like, yeah, okay. That's a whole other conversation. Because you would hope that these are exactly the type of things that matter to a board. Depends what that advisory board is.
Trust there to be able to tell them that information, then.
I was a bit concerned about hearing that. And that's really what the board is there, so that you can go to them with your vulnerabilities and have help, have support around those things. And if you're lucky enough to have one, like try and make it the right one, or whatever that, it may not even be a formal board or formal advisory board, but who are those people around you who are supporting you on this journey? The other thing she said, which I thought was really interesting, and I think that perhaps we hopefully are a part of as well, is she said, I don't want to be an echo chamber around the idea of working every day. And so, how did you feel when you heard her say that?
Yeah, well, I think she got some inspiration from other kind of podcasts out there, like Guy Raz, How I Built This. But she was kind of calling out, in a way, a bit of the hustle culture and all of that stuff. And I think it was quite a balanced view, really, is what I kind of took from what she was saying is that, yes, there are times absolutely when you have to go all guns blazing and have late nights and get to that end goal. But coming back to that word again, sustainability, you can't do that for 12 months a year, because you're going to get burnt out, or something's going to crash, or something's going to die.
Yeah, I thought she explained it really well. That idea of have some sprints basically, and there's going to be more intense periods of time. If that's all the time, then there's some fundamental things in the business that need looking at. The thing I often talk about when it comes to this is also, I think there's a little bit of founder delusion in terms of when we get to the next step, it's going to be easier. So let's just push to that next step, and then everything's going to fall into place and it's going to be easy. And I was actually talking to another founder who, they've just achieved like a really big funding round that like most people would see as that milestone next step. And they are literally at that point of, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And like, they've just got all that, all that money, and they are going to, but
the challenges don't really change. They just get bigger. The problems get bigger, and you need more people around you, particularly more experienced advisors and a board and more formal processes and that support network, and staying on top of your mental hygiene and mental fitness, because if you want to go to that place of scaling a big business, then you're going to need all of the help that you can get around you.
Kind of talk about the Greiner growth model, where it goes like the growth of a business over time as it gets more mature, just goes through each of these different evolution points, and each one of those has its own crisis. But then each one of those also has those steps you can take to evolve through it. And that's your job as a founder, is to evolve through those things. But again, recognizing that is part of the journey, that it's not just we get to this like next place and suddenly it's going to be smooth sailing. It's like we've gone to the top of the mountain and we're just going to like snowboard down or something.
So the grass is always greener, but it's not, is it?
Yeah, if you did that, you'd just be back at the bottom, wouldn't you? So, which I'm guessing is not what you want for your business. So, I think having that long-term view, and I felt like she articulated that so well, and it really came up as a theme throughout the whole interview around being a sustainable, or building a sustainable business. And
one interesting point that she said as well, obviously raising a pre-seed and seed round and looking at Series A at some point, was that actually taking on investment is something that maybe she wouldn't do again in the future. So I thought that was quite interesting, having been very successful at fundraising, the reasons behind why. Unfortunately, I didn't ask her that question, but it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, she alluded to it. I've definitely seen people, two things, like people who have struggled to fundraise and therefore bootstrapped and then gone, well, actually, I'm glad in the end that we didn't have anyone else there, and that we were able to build this thing without those external investors. Even like doing acquisitions at the end, and then like taking more of that share out at the end, and really being able to have a business journey that's much more set by them, and isn't just about chasing that investment, reporting to investors, trying to stay on the right side of investors. And I got that sense. She kind of alluded to like maybe how things might have been a little bit easier if investors weren't there. And I've definitely seen people, maybe I had a little bit of an experience myself, but not crazy bad experience. We definitely needed investment, but I've seen people who've gone through it and kind of gone, did we really want to do that? But then I always think as a founder, you're making the best decisions that you can at the time as well. Yeah.
And also like it probably levels you up in some way of having to do those investor updates every month, or how often you're doing them, and keep being accountable to somebody else.
That's
actually
definitely how I experienced it. Like I liked having it, because to me it kind of gave me a little bit of an anchor, and there was something. It didn't feel like I had co-founders, but it didn't feel like I was out there on my own and just floating through this. And I actually heard another successful founder the other day saying the same thing. She was like, I really like it because they sort of keep us in check, and actually they're great investors because we can have the conversations with them. You know, a good investor turns into somebody who is part of that support system, right? And not only that, they potentially have access or networks that can bring you more money in when you need that next round of funding too.
Exactly. And I think if you've got that good relationship of an investor, then it's great. But then if you're misaligned on values or big vision, and there's going to be lots of challenges there.
And it is that thing of like being kind of confident enough, and you know, lucky enough, if for want of a better word, to be able to be picky about those investors too. You know, doing the due diligence on those who want to fund you. Are they the right people? If you walk in and you always just feel like it's a power differential, or you know, you're always trying to report to them, but what is there in return? And they're sort of treating you like a child as a founder, which, you know, I think that definitely does happen in that dynamic sometimes. Then maybe that's not what you need for your business. I think we've kind of established that Hannah had a really clear vision for the type of leader she wants to be, the type of culture she wants to build, that she is building. Shall we find out more about her vision for the future of the business?
Hannah, I'm keen to know your insights on what the future of the rental market here in the UK will look like, and what part does hybr play in that future?
I'm really passionate about there not being any empty rooms in the UK residential market. And what I mean by that is looking across the residential sector and even some hospitality. And if there's any empty rooms, repurposing them, even if it's just for a short tenancy. Previously, we had the mindset of purpose-built student accommodation only for students, built to rent for professionals, and co-living for kind of nomads, and senior living only for, 60 plus. But actually, if you look at a lot of those buildings, for example, on build to rent, 50-60% of the buildings are taken up by students. And the same with co-living. You have such a collective mix of personalities. And I believe it should be matching kind of tenant profiles based on what are you looking for, location, budget, style, and what are you looking to get out of your rental? Are you looking for a social space? Are you looking to just live with your friends and have loads of parties and kind of be a bit isolated? Or are you looking for a quiet place to focus on your career or your studies? And, there's lots of different aspects of that in terms of creating the right communities. And we should be matching based on that into the right buildings rather than based on these kind of pre-decided ideas of what a building should be used for. So I'm really pro mixed living, whether that's young professionals and students, even senior living and students, so that you have a range of different people within a building that are all looking to get the same out of that rental experience. And then you can create communities that are actually using those amenity spaces. And so, that's I'm a big proponent for. I think that's really the only way that we're going to tackle the housing crisis is if we think creatively about how we use spaces.
I love that, Hannah. And I think what comes across from our conversation is I think you're on a mission to tackle inefficiencies in the marketplace and optimise for a better way of living. And that really comes across from you.
Thank you.
What really drives you then? That's what I'm really interested to know.
What drives me is having a really clear vision of what's needed and knowing where we are today and slowly building our way towards it. I think that's what really motivates me. I feel very lucky that compared to a lot of my friends, every time my alarm goes off, I really jump out of bed and I really run to the office. And that's because I'm so dedicated to what we're doing. And that sense of purpose, I think I've taken for granted, but it's not everyone has that. And it's an incredible privilege to be able to work on hybr. And I'm so driven by just going after that goal and bringing something to market that's needed for both tenants and landlords and parents and universities and even kind of at the government level.
Hannah, looking ahead, what does success look like for hybr? And how do you know once you've achieved it?
Success looks like we're supporting the majority of the student market to find houses, find any additional services that they need so that they can have a great experience at university and focus on their studies. That we're helping universities work with them to help their students find housing outside of halls of residence. And we're working with landlords and agents to quickly fill up their portfolios with the right tenants who are going to have a happy, great tenancy with those landlords and can be retained over a long period of time. So we're creating a really positive experience for our industry, for our markets, and that we have a lot of the market share. So we're across the UK and we're able to deliver that experience to every kind of city and have real positive impact. And then we can bring out other additional features like, the hybr passport, accessing forward funding, so be able to give students who don't have UK guarantors capital so that they can actually go and find a place to rent and afford going to university. There's a lot more on the kind of social impact side, but it's really just hybr having a large presence across the student accommodation industry.
And are you able to share any of those metrics or KPIs against some of those targets?
Well, there's 3 million students that study. There's 1.8 million students that rent privately. We'd love to have, 60% of the market share. We'd love to be, the dominant player that allows students to find housing and everything they need and can deliver the best kind of lease-up experience for landlords and agents that plugs into their CRM and property management system. So it's a really connected, great tenant experience.
So Hannah, if you had to distill down just one piece of advice for an early stage founder, what would that one piece of advice be?
Hard to pick one piece of advice. I think given the market, it'd be really think about how to build a sustainable, profitable business to de-risk your long-term growth. So starting out with a really clear understanding of what does a sustainable business model look like for you. How can you validate that on the smaller scale? You could have 5 users, but how can you validate that in the hackiest, smallest, way with the least amount of investment in tech? But you can bring something quickly to market to validate that your concept, validate that the problem is big enough, the market is big enough, and that you are going to be able to build a long-term sustainable business.
Great bit of advice there. And where can people find out a bit more about hybr online?
So you can go to hybr, which is www.hybr.co.uk. Check us out on as hybr.uk on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, hybr on LinkedIn. And I'm Hannah Chappatte if anyone wants to get in touch with me on LinkedIn.
Hannah, a bit of a curveball here, but if I knew you better, what's one question that I would have asked you and what is the answer to that question?
Are you motivated by the fear of losing, or are you motivated by the idea of success? And it's a really interesting question that I've been thinking a lot about recently and discussing with friends. And if you look at a lot of the professional athletes, Olympians in particular, they always say that they're driven by the fear of losing. It's not about winning, it's about the fear of losing. That's what drives them. And I think it's a really interesting question. And I think a lot of the time our motivations are negative, but it ends up in resulting in something positive. And I think a lot of the time as a founder, we're all driven by this kind of need to prove ourselves and need to kind of do better and a bit of a self-lashing, but it ends up resulting in something positive, and you can then put that energy towards something that actually is going to drive a lot of positive change in society.
And Hannah, I know you had a question that you'd love to ask our listeners. So what is that question?
The question is, if you could kind of put yourself back in that mindset and being in freshers, starting university, or going back into second year and you're just about to go back into it, as hybr, what should we be doing? What should we be giving to the student community? Should it be a huge kind of freshers nightclub party where we sponsor drinks and have like an activity and money behind, so mostly like money behind the bar? Should it be B, that we're doing kind of informative educational webinars where we're kind of helping students think about how they're going to find their next house and answering any kind of key questions around renting for the first time? Or should it be C, doing lots of kind of guerrilla marketing, so getting our student ambassadors wearing wacky kind of hybr merch around campus, handing out freebies, attaching balloons to them, really trying to do things that stand out on campus, infiltrating student life, and then kind of getting people talking about hybr? Or should it be D, that hybr should be sponsoring, a big billboard that says hybr on it with a QR code, so we're getting a lot of kind of getting a lot of volume of people looking at us, and then can sign up and learn more about us. What are those 4 options? What will drive the best engagement? What would you want hybr to do if you were in freshers again?
Great question. I think I know what I'd answer if I was a student again, but I won't give that away now. Hannah, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So do you remember those early days if you went to uni? What would you want from hybr? I actually can't explicitly speak to this because I didn't stay in halls or in a shared house when I was at uni. In fact, I've only been in a shared house for 9 months in my entire life, and it was like the worst thing ever. So, yeah, I just avoided it altogether. Maybe hybr could have helped me because it might have found like a good environment in a student house. Those things sound oxymoronic to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember being there and second year we were with a group of lads. There were 7 of us originally, and then 1 dropped out, and it was chaotic. Like, you need somebody to take that leadership to try and organise everything, and I don't know why it fell on my shoulders, so I was trying to do it all and be responsible. But one thing is, if you're putting legal contracts in your name in terms of everything, then you've got that responsibility on your shoulders as well, and there's a much easier way now, thankfully, of doing things. And yeah, I wish 20 plus years ago that I had something like that could have made it a lot easier.
And isn't it interesting that it's the students that keep pushing this as a concept? Because I think there's probably an outside perception of just like, oh, students, they're a pain, blah, blah, blah. And this whole thing of them being just like completely not even shortlisted for properties and everything else. But actually, there's those people like you who are really diligent and just need some help and need the tools to help them to do this. And like you said, there's always one person in the group who is like, come on, why don't you sort this out? And you end up having to shoulder all of that because you're just on top of things in a way that maybe other people aren't focused on when they're second year students. So yeah, I think it's those kind of people who are like, we're doing all this work and we're having to wrangle people, and they're not always even the easiest people to wrangle, etc. And so having that platform, like I said, I think that it seems very clear that there is a need for this within a niche market, but a sizable market, and for the time being at least, a refreshing market every year, new students coming through. Also, I think there was she didn't talk much about it, but it did sound like there was potential in the future. She talked about the kind of being able to work with, or that vision, I guess, of breaking down the silos and not having just like students over here and like retirement housing over here. So I did actually really like that vision, and to not have any empty rooms across the UK.
Yeah, I mean, housing is such a big problem in this country, isn't it? And the shortage is, spoken about so much in the news every single year, and where to build, and if properties are going underutilized, then yeah, it's a crime, really, isn't it? And I think
crazy. I think we all see it, don't we, in our cities, and we see all of this building work going on, and yet there's this mismatch. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, I feel really good about the fact that she's starting with one niche, but actually there is a wider problem here, which she might be really well placed to, and hybr might be really well placed to solve or be part of that puzzle at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got that track record of delivering and building out a really great profitable business model, then why not go after other sectors and industries that are related? I
wanted to talk a bit about the question that Hannah would have asked herself, and this idea of what motivates you? Is it fear or is it success? And again, I think it says quite a lot about who she is. But I was thinking about it because the idea of fear being the motivation, and I know she talked about it in terms of athletes, like it's that fear of failure. That's why they keep pushing on. And I've been going on a YouTube deep dive on like hiking disasters and mountaineering disasters. Yeah, it's a weird deep dive. Yeah, I don't know why. I was in a bit of a flare up and I just needed things to take my mind off stuff and I couldn't move. So I was like, these are compelling stories. I don't know. But there's a lot of that where people won't turn back. So, you know, for example, if they've invested tens of thousands of pounds to go to Everest and they get most of the way up there, but they start to use their oxygen at a much too higher rate in a way that means they're not going to get to the summit and back again safely, but they'll get to the summit. And so this idea of that motivation to get to the summit but not come back, like, well, they don't think about not coming back again, right? They're just so afraid of not hitting that goal of getting to the summit. But actually it's quite dangerous. And I think even in the athletes she was talking about, obviously, again, kind of being a gymnast and looking at some of the psychology around that, and psychology of when gymnastics coaching, that fear-led piece, great for like pushing you on in the sport at that moment, but is not ideal for what happens if something goes wrong, what happens what happens at the end of your sporting career, you know, and your identity is no longer tied to that. So I think it's a complex type of thing.
It's a really interesting one when you've dedicated so much time and energy towards achieving something and you're like, I've come too far to let this go. I'm continuing no matter what. Then, yeah, it will drive you. But if the cost and you're not looking at the dangers in a practical sense, then it can be fatal. Yeah.
And this is in kind of relatively simple, for want of a better word. I'm not suggesting it's simple to like be to climb Everest or be a high performing athlete, but actually they're pretty well trodden paths or clear routes, right? Versus something like entrepreneurship, which is so much more complex and so much more adaptive and changing and everything else. And there is no clear path at all. So I think trying to get that right in as a founder and trying to feel that balance in yourself is something that takes quite a long time, I think, and perhaps it's an ongoing process to really figure out which are the moments where I need to step up and be like, okay, I've put in the work, I'm going to do this final push and there's no way I'm not getting to the end of this now. Like, yeah, and that fear of failing or the fear of not showing up, and versus, okay, when are the moments to step back? When are the moments to really focus on actually it's the success that's motivating me here? It's that vision. It's what I can do for my team. And it's the difference. I guess for me, when I hear fear, immediately what I'm thinking is fight or flight. That actually is not the best place to make decisions from. So it's all about kind of, what does it activate in you as a founder at what point in time as well?
Yeah, and I think as a founder, you've got to be a bit more pragmatic as well, haven't you? Like, you've got to reassess at that point of time, based on all of the limited knowledge that you have, what is the right decision for me now? Because it is going to change and evolve over time.
Yeah, what is right now is the right question. And you change, the business changes, the people around you change. We're not the same people even 1 year to the next, right? Especially when we're going through the founder journey. And I always think the idea of, you know, you do need this 10-year stretch. Like, can you keep doing this for 10 years? And at the same time that you've got, you know, as you were alluding to, that kind of sunk cost fallacy too. Like, can you step away when it's not the right thing? Can you pivot? Can you like let go of an idea when it's not the right one? So I think that's everything we've got to say about Hannah's episode today. Make sure that you've gone and checked Hannah's question. So the question was, if you could put yourself back in the mindset of going back to university, what should we be doing? A, a nightclub kind of party, as she described it, that kind of a big event, freshers type event. B, an informative educational webinar or a series of webinars. C, wacky marketing, being on campus dressed up and merchandise and that kind of thing. And D, they should be sponsoring a big billboard with a QR code with their name on it and then getting people to find them from there. So Hannah would like to know, of those 4, what would you do? Head on over to our socials and answer that question. And it will be really helpful for Hannah to get that feedback from you. So yeah, go and do it now. Ollie, what are people saying about our last episode? The question from Bristol Office Hub.
So Ollie from the Bristol Office Hub wanted to know, what convinces you to go back into the office? Is it A, collaboration and cross-selling, B, location, lifestyle and amenities, or C, learning and team catch-ups, or D, just getting out of the house? The results were really split actually. So 17% collaboration and cross-selling, followed by another 17% for D, just getting out of the house. And there was a tie then, 33% each for B and C. So location, lifestyle and amenities, and learning and team catch-ups. What's the reason you go back into the office, Becky?
It's probably that learning and team catch-ups piece. I don't feel like I need it for many of the other things. I quite like, if I want to just be around somewhere, I'll just like randomly go to a cafe or something like that. So it is about the other people and that those serendipitous conversations that you end up having that allow you to jump through wormholes, which is my favourite thing to try and do. Like things you didn't expect to happen, and then you're like, oh, great, I spoke to you and now my problem is solved, or that thing that I thought was going to be really hard is simple now.
Yeah.
So that for me is the best reason for being in the office.
Definitely more of those serendipitous moments that you can create by being somewhere other than at home.
Yeah.
Ollie, tell us about our next guest.
Well, it's a solo episode, Becky, so it's back to me and you on the grounding. So tune in for that. It's going to be going out live on LinkedIn in a couple of weeks.
Lovely. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget, there's a big selection of previous episodes. Just search Founded and Grounded on your favourite podcast player. Thank you for listening to Founded and Grounded with Ollie Collard and Dr. Becky Sage. Don't forget to press that follow button to help us to grow the show.